So my name is Rachel Wonderscheid. I'm the director of the Montana After School Alliance. We are an organization that works across the state of Montana, creating partnerships and opportunities for programs that serve kids when the school day ends or when the school year ends. So that means everything from before school, after school, holiday breaks, summer breaks. We're always trying to get kids more opportunities around the state of Montana. And we do this through encouraging programs to try new options, to try and bring new programming to their kids. And we work really with kids any ages about 5 and up. And so most of the programs that are going to be joining us today are also programs who have worked with us in the past. We're very excited to have you all here. And the purpose of this meeting is to again gather after our STEM summit that was held last spring. We wanted to launch a report that was developed from that summit. And we also wanted to bring everybody together again to try and take some next steps to growing STEM learning in Montana, STEM learning that works in all programs. So now we have a poll that we'd like to get you all to answer for us. So if you could answer where you're joining us from today on the region. Most from Southwest Montana. Okay, so overall, our goal is to connect and continue to build on the relationships that we created at the STEM Summit and that have been created in past summits in past years. This was our third in-person summit that was developed by a wonderful committee of people and was really, really successful. And most of you attended, so we hope that you are joining again because you felt those relationships were really worthwhile. I think we might be ready to just kind of talk a little bit about some of the history of the STEM Summit. Again, we had one that was in 2017, one in 2019, and then this last, the one in 2022, because of COVID, was held virtually. And our last one was in Helena. The first two were in Bozeman. One, as each summit has occurred, it's progressed, but more importantly, all of the relationships that have been built around the state have grown each time we've had a gathering together. We felt like this one in Helena was one of our most unique. We had kind of brought in a few different pieces. We had workshops and we had a student showcase that had never been done before. If you look at this graphic on the screen right now, we can kind of see who attended. The importance of a STEM summit to us is not to just have folks who are working with kids, but to have anyone who is interested in creating more opportunities for our kids across the state, whether or not they get direct access to those kids. And so we had nonprofits, industry, higher education, K-12 education, government and military, parents, after school and summer programs, libraries, and museums. And it looks like from this that probably our after school programs were one of our highest. And that's probably because we are so well connected as the Montana After School Alliance. This last STEM Summit was held on April 13th in Helena, and we had hoped to engage more of our policymakers. We were able to bring the governor's wife, our First Lady, Susan Gianforte, who is an engineer herself. She joined as one of our keynote speakers. We brought in folks from the National Girls Collaborative to do a specific work session for any of the programs who wanted to get extra in-depth professional development. And then we had our traditional work session in the afternoon where we talked about some of the barriers and opportunities in STEM. Then we finished the night with an open house where a lot of programs were able to share what they were doing with each other and show some of the opportunities that kids have across our state. And finally, we had our first student showcase. This was my favorite part of the day. We had kids from mostly the Helena area because it was held in Helena, but they were able to do some experiments, show off their robotics, and tell the stories about what they've been doing and why STEM has made such a difference in their lives and how the learning opportunities both in and out of school have really changed the paths that they're on. And that's really the key to all of our work in STEM, is to really just give kids new opportunities to explore these incredible fields that they could have job opportunities in the future, or just enjoy as kids. And so we want to try to brainstorm together and create these opportunities and grow them, which is what we as a group are always trying to look for opportunities to do. So now I'm going to turn it over to Susie Taylor, who is the director of the Science and Math Resource Center. She is going to introduce herself, and she's going to cover some topics in general STEM areas across Montana and the country.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susie Taylor. As Rachel said, I'm with the Science Math Resource Center at Montana State University. We're a STEM outreach center in the Department of Education. I'm also the co-leader of the Montana Girls STEM Collaborative. So I'm going to share with you today just a little bit of data before we dive into the cool stuff. So yeah, this is a slide that we shared at the STEM Summit in Helena, and it's really just meant to ground our work in why we were gathering then, and really why we're gathering now as well. There's kind of a lot on this slide, so I'll just read those stats that are in the hexagons really quickly. On the left, you can see that the number of STEM jobs is predicted to grow by more than 10% over the next decade. This is actually a statistic we've used for the last decade, pretty much since I was doing this work. And that's not to mean it's cliche, but rather that the number of STEM jobs just keeps growing and growing every year. And so it's really important that we help our young people understand what that might mean to have a STEM job. In the center there, you can see that the US is at risk of surrendering its global leadership in technological innovation. This comes from the National Science Foundation and really shows why the NSF is so invested in the workforce of the future. And as you'll see in just a moment, they channel a lot of resources towards supporting educators and young people. And then lastly, the hexagon on the right says in Montana, 65% of students are below proficiency in math, and 64% are below proficiency in science. This is a statistic from our Office of Public Instruction and kind of mirrors what's happening around the country. We can move on to the next slide here. And I will say, whenever we have a STEM Summit, I've been honored to be part of all 4 of them. We always like to ground our work in some data before we move into the working part. I'm going to show you just 4 slides here. They're broken down into national and then Montana, starting with some K-12 and workforce development and also some statistics from after school. So again, there's kind of a lot here, so I'll go through it really quickly. Starting with some good news at the national level, secondary students are taking more math and science courses than they have in the past, and the students from different demographics are taking more of those STEM courses as well. I wanted to mention really quickly the CHIPS and Science Act. It's a sweeping federal movement that supports technology and industry, but also has a lot of resources for STEM education for preschoolers, researchers on rural STEM education, collaborations between teachers and scientists, and the incorporation of art and design into STEM, which most of us would call STEAM. Some of the challenges, though, as we already heard, the US continues to score lower than many other countries in STEM categories. Sadly, STEM achievement scores vary by socioeconomic status and race or ethnicity. And then no surprise, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to kind of trickle through and have an effect on learning. We can flip over next to this slide about some national after-school data. And I want to thank Chris Natesy from the National After School Alliance, who was at our STEM Summit and I think might be with us here today. The good news is that opportunities for STEM learning are on the rise in after school. Parents increasingly see after school as important for STEM learning. Programs are serving students underrepresented in STEM careers, and participation in after school STEM programs increases students' interest in STEM, their STEM identity, and their knowledge of STEM careers. Some of the challenges here, again, STEM opportunities are not evenly distributed to all families, and there are still a lot of barriers to after-school participation that keep all students from benefiting. We can move on to the next one here. These are some Montana statistics for K-12 and workforce development. Good news, Montana's status and related opportunities as a research leader continue to grow. I'm going to mention just 2 programs. One is the new Headwaters Tech Hub. This is a highly competitive new designation that came to our region I think we were one of just 30 out of maybe 200 applications. And this will benefit industry and education in Montana. And then I just wanted to mention research dollars at our universities continue to grow. This shows that the National Science Foundation and other agencies want to invest in Montana, and this really supports our kids and teachers as well. Some of the challenges, we're suffering from a teacher shortage, no surprise, and that was exacerbated by the pandemic. And then just a couple barriers here that were identified in a needs assessment we did a few years ago. Our teachers, our educators want to participate in professional development, but some of the barriers that they face, lack of substitute teachers, funding to attend, time off from work, travel, lack of resources, and then access to technology. And then lastly, one last slide here on some Montana after school statistics. Again, thanks to Chris Snitzy. Good news, in 2020, about 2/3 of Montana parents reported that their child's after-school program offered STEM learning opportunities. That's up. More than 10,000 Montana children have STEM learning opportunities in after-school programs. Most Montana parents believe that STEM and computer science learning opportunities are important when considering an after-school program. And 76% of Montana parents overall agree that after-school programs help children gain interest in skills in STEM. We're going to end here with some of the challenges, because next up, we're going to start talking about how we face those challenges. There are several roadblocks that still exist for Montana children to access after-school programming. The top three are cost, transportation, and lack of access to available programs. And sadly, all three of these have increased as barriers from 2014 to 2020. I think we're on to our next slide here. And from here, I want to introduce you to Sarah Filzer. She's the Science and Education Director at Exploration Works in Helena. And she's going to help us take a deep dive into some of the work we did at the STEM Summit. So take it from here, Sarah.
Thank you, Susie. As Susie shared, I am Sarah Filzer. I am the Science and Education Director at Exploration Works in Helena. And I was so proud and pleased to be a part of the organizing committee for the STEM Summit this year. And I'm really excited to go through these findings with you all. And thank you for joining us today on this call. So at this year's summit, we had 5 key questions that we asked participants that address the barriers faced in providing or growing STEM, who is being overlooked in conversations around STEM, how can we help students explore STEM careers, the support that is needed by those providing STEM programming now, and what do we need to do to advance STEM learning in Montana? So looking at that first key question, what I would like you to do, and we don't want to dwell on our kind of challenges and the barriers that we're facing, but it is helpful to ground the work that we're doing in those barriers that we are facing currently. So what I'm going to have all of you on the call do is think of your greatest challenge or barrier in one word. Type that in the chat, but don't hit send yet. So one word, what is that top challenge? What is that barrier to STEM learning in your community? Get that ready to go, type that in the chat. And then I'm going to count down from 3. It says 5, but I'm going to count down from 3. And I'll have everybody hit send. And I'm curious to see what everybody has posted. So 3, 2, 1, send. Okay, so yeah, transportation, engagement, time, teachers, money, volunteers, access, money. Yeah, teachers overwhelmed. Yeah. Okay, so if we want to kind of switch to what we found at the STEM Summit, were some of the challenges and barriers, that number one barrier was money. The lack of funding, lack of resources, that kind of stuff. And then it was people, volunteers, then transportation. Students can't get to the programming. They want to attend, but they can't get there. Also, we can't take them anywhere. Awareness. People just actually knowing what exists, and then collaborating across the state. Yeah, if anybody has any kind of innovative solutions that they've come across for some of those barriers, and they want to pop those in the chat, please feel free. This is part of kind of building that collaboration across the state. So if anybody has found any good ways to kind of address those barriers in their communities, please feel free to share. Yeah, so for that second key question, who are we overlooking when it comes to STEM? Who is not in the room? Who is the people who are not at the table who need to be? So if you all could maybe answer this question in the poll here, we're going to give you 30 seconds or so. Doesn't need to be a long answer, can be just a couple of words. We want to see, who do you think is most missing from the table? And those voices that really do need to be heard. We'll give you probably maybe 15 more seconds. Okay. Anybody still need some time to answer that poll? Feel like we're good to go ahead and close it. Once we close it, y'all can't answer it anymore. Perfect. All right, Nora. Yeah, did you want to see? We can maybe share out some of those answers. Awesome. Looks like it was answered. I don't know if we can see any of those answers. I don't know. Heather, Nora, can you guys see what some of those long answers were to that poll? If we do want to go ahead and just switch to that next slide, and we can show you what the findings were from the STEM Summit. And we can kind of see what the participants at the STEM Summit showed and answered who needs to be in the conversation. And I see some of those in the chat as well. We were kind of seeing parents, some homeschoolers. Yeah, so a lot of the people that the participants of the STEM Summit believed were missing from the table were those rural populations, low income, parents and caregivers, industry and STEM professionals, Native American communities, especially important in Montana, the youth. Are we asking what they want? Are we asking what they're interested in? And gender expansive people. Are we making sure that we are being inclusive and recognizing all of those communities? Awesome. And then maybe if we can get some of the poll results, we can pop them in the chat a little bit later too. Just kind of talking about all that. Awesome. Okay. So for our key question number 3, we asked, how can we help with STEM careers and pathways? So looking at providers, how do we help build those STEM careers? What are we missing? What do we need? And at the STEM Summit, we came up with that we need to be working to kind of build those pathways. So working with K-12 schools, career and technical education to focus on career pathways. Incorporating role models. That's huge. Getting role models incorporated into the programs, but also having those STEM professionals doing hands-on activities, going to those STEM professionals' places of work, if they have a laboratory, if they're working in a machine shop, if they're an engineer, things like that. Focusing on like curricula activities on real world things, working at home, engaging parents more at home, and having more support for them at home. That youth voice, getting them involved in what's interested to them. What do they want to know? Build those community connections, and also creating some industry partnerships. So not just looking within higher education or even just kind of that K-12 education bubble that we work in, but looking at industry, looking at people who are working in STEM careers who are maybe not typically what would you think of as a STEM career, like a wildlife biologist or a doctor or something like that. And then offering those internships And job shadowing. Yeah, paleontologist. I love that. So our question is, what is the topic? And if we want to throw that poll up, we've got another poll too, and this is interesting information for us. What are you most excited to focus on for those STEM careers and pathways? Like maybe it's something you're not working on right now. Maybe it's okay, I want to get more role models in. That's what I'm really excited about working on in my programming. I'm really excited about creating those industry partnerships. All of those kind of really cool different pathways. What are you most excited to focus on? I want to pop that in that poll. And I'm going to take this time also to say a giant thank you to Nora and Heather and Bethany and Rachel from MTAA they've been working so hard on making sure that this is awesome and all these polls and getting the slides together. So a big shout out and thank you to all of you guys for doing the behind the scenes quiet stuff. Appreciate you. Awesome. Ooh, okay. This is really interesting. I kind of like how we've got people across the board. We're excited about a lot of different things. It looks like getting the youth voice, so getting those guys involved and creating those industry partnerships, maybe just edge out a little bit of the curricula and role models and building those STEM pathways. But awesome. That is really interesting. So when we share out the link to the full report, there is going to be an extended list of ideas and some different highlights, different areas of action in the report. So you'll get to be able to see kind of more of how we can really accomplish those things in our programming across the state. Ooh, animation and camera use. Love that. Okay, very cool. We want to move on. Awesome. Okay, so our key question number 4, what was the number one thing that would support you? Looking at after school time providers, looking at the industry professionals as well that we had at the STEM Summit. And the biggest one was collaboration, which is probably of no surprise to anyone on this call. Funding at a close second, but collaboration hits that top spot. So funded opportunities, making sure that we are able to adequately help people so that their time is, worthwhile. But getting those funded opportunities to share time and knowledge and partnerships between in-school and out-of-school time. So kind of focusing on that top collaboration item, drop some things in the chat. What does that look like for you? What does that look like for your program? Who are you excited about collaborating with? Maybe it's somebody on the call. As you're adding those into the chat, I do want to shout out a really cool collaboration that did end up happening because of the STEM Summit this year. And actually one of them I know for sure is on the call, but Starbase Fort Harrison, which is located here in Helena, connected with Code Girls United. And they have actually developed a program now here in Helena between Starbase and Code Girls United. And it was because they connected at the STEM Summit. So creating these creating these partnerships within this little STEM ecosystem, this bubble that we have started to build, we can start working across the state on some of those really cool collaborations. I love that. Connecting with the geologist, want to reach every teacher in Montana. Sames. I want to collab with everybody. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Having programming on site at your venue, but bringing people in to deliver that programming. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, because a lot of us, we have the venue, but we don't have the means to actually provide the programming, or vice versa. We have the means and the opportunity to provide the programming, but we don't have a venue yet. So looking at building those collaborations with both the school districts, but also, again, looking at museums. I know a couple of us in here are museums, and those institutes of higher education that are also exist in a lot of, the major towns here in Montana. They're great spots for collaboration as well. Yeah. And then our last kind of key question there was, what needs to happen to advance STEM in Montana? As you can see with our little pie chart there, one of the biggest ones was awareness and community engagement. So getting people in our communities and in the broader Montana community aware of what's happening and what needs to happen. Collaboration, noticed again, there's a big chunk as well. Funding, and then that legislative support policy, but also equitable access, making sure that as we are making the community aware of what we're doing and the awesome work that we are doing across the state, making sure that it is accessible by all as much as we can. So looking forward, what we've highlighted with these findings, this is what we want to focus on. This is what we, as the STEM Summit, we were told this is what we want to focus on. It was so inspiring to see all of these voices in the room at the summit, and it has been very, very enlightening to see what this report has come back with all of this information from that. So I'm going to hand it back over to Rachel. Thank you so much for participating in our polls and putting stuff in the chat. And I'm excited to see where STEM goes in the future in Montana. Go ahead and take it away, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And thank you all for participating so much in the chat with us. Both, we wanted to bring to you the STEM Summit report so that you guys could see what you came up with at the STEM Summit. And we also wanted to kind of retouch base on some of those key questions that we addressed at the summit. And so Sarah working through that and then polling you today kind of gauges where we are today and what our priorities can be. And so we all wanted to kind of just address those questions and see if we were all on the same track or if we should prioritize some over the others. And it does look like there are some areas and some topics that we can prioritize a bit more and really focus in on and bring more professional development to you all and maybe further our discussions. And so what we are most excited about is that every year at the STEM Summit, the biggest request has been more regular contact with each other so that you can collaborate. And because the STEM Summit happens every year and it's a pretty major event to put on, we realize that we need to bring it to a smaller focus group. And we've decided that we already have the beginnings of a Montana STEM ecosystem with the folks who have attended past STEM summits and who are here on this call today. And so we really want to take that kind of just seed that we already have and plant it and grow it into something in Montana that can benefit all of us and be a much more connected group. And so we are formally starting a STEM ecosystem, but what we don't know yet is exactly what it's going to look like. So we're hoping to form a planning group that can be really the decision makers behind this STEM ecosystem, with always the focus of the students at the center, but bringing in as many of the key partners that have attended past STEM summits, but also bringing in those voices that we have identified are missing from the table and bringing everybody to that table so that we can really start growing a more formal group that can meet more regularly between summits and can share with each other what each group is doing and then also kind of learn from each other and maybe even share resources. Also, there are more formal STEM summits across the country, and there are a few different federal funding sources. And so that planning group, we're hoping will look into that. And it could be, it could grow from something that is fairly informal to something that is much formal and is very supportive across our state. We are hoping that that planning group can kind of take it where they want. There will be many of the folks who have brought you this STEM Summit on that group, but we also know that there's many of you out there who have participated year after year and who may be ready to kind of take your participation to a greater level. And so I think that they're going to drop into the link a link right now for being more informed specifically about this STEM ecosystem mailing list. And so if you either click on that link or use that QR code on your phone, that will take you to a specific sign up to be signed up for the STEM ecosystem mailing list. If you are super excited about the STEM ecosystem and absolutely want to be on the planning committee, the leadership team for the STEM ecosystem, please send a specific email to any of us at MTAA or any of us on this call, and we will make sure that you are part of that conversation. But generally, the STEM mailing list will also share out opportunities between each other and more formal gatherings that happen more regularly, both in person and virtually. So I think I also want to, I want to keep this link up here for just a minute longer so that you guys have the opportunity to sign up for it. But another really important piece of this is that I want to thank everybody who made past STEM summits possible. And everybody who was on that planning committee and in April made that day happen for all of us. And so the main planners on that group were the MAPS program, Montana State University Science and Resource Center, Exploration Works, the Montana After School Alliance, the Helena School Age Childcare Program, and Spectra UM from the University of Montana. Those folks will be continuing to be on the STEM ecosystem, but we also know that we are not all the voices across Montana, and we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to join us and really be a part of what can be next in Montana and how we can grow this ecosystem into a much more regular and formal meeting place for everybody who cares about bringing STEM learning to our children and creating more future opportunities for Montanans. Also, I want to thank our sponsors for this last year's event. They are what made this event doable. The Million Goals Moonshot Program, the Overdeck Family Foundation, EdChoice, Montana Gear Up, Wildfire Defense Systems, NSF EPSCoR, and the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. Those were all of the funders who made that event in April happen and who made this STEM report, especially NFS EPSCoR. They were the ones who provided the funding for the STEM Summit report. And that link to the report was just dropped into the chat. You can either get it virtually, or if you really want a hard copy, you can also let us know, because we do have a few that were printed. They will be at future events as well. But they're beautiful. Heather Jameson from the Montana After School Alliance and Susie Taylor made that report possible. And so I want to be sure you guys have the opportunity to take a look at it, and want to make sure that you guys get to use it, and then that we use that as sort of a foundation for growing the STEM ecosystem in our state, so that we can continue doing what we already do, but doing it together more formally and more with more excitement, because it's always better to work together. At this point, if you, again, we're going to maybe put that link to register for the email list in the chat, or bring up back that that last slide that has the QR code and the link. And we are done with the formal launch of our STEM report and STEM ecosystem. And we are going to close out the meeting in a few minutes. But again, just before you go, we want to have a feedback survey. If you could answer this survey and let us know if you have any specific ideas for the STEM ecosystem, any comments or feedback you'd like about what you're needing from us. And if you, or if you just want to say hi, you can also add that into the feedback survey. And finally, I just want to say thank you one more time to everybody who was a part of making today happen, making past STEM summits happen. Special thank you to Susie and Sarah for co-hosting this specific webinar for us. And again, if you didn't get time to fill out that feedback survey right now, or if you're listening to this recording after the fact, you can always just email any of us, and we are excited to work with you in the future. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your very busy schedules to be with us here today, and we are really excited about what comes next. So I think we are done, and you can jump off the call, but do stay tuned for more exciting STEM opportunities in Montana.